you been bit? I said, have you been bit? Well, get in here then. Well, I'm glad you're not dead. Welcome to the guild.
Oh, so I suppose from being from the north that you're used to this kind of, nuclear winter stuff.
Well, interestingly, what kind of happened was that, as you're aware, we had this marvellous Brexit thing, which then automatically kind of enforced what we call, the Major General Sturgeon, as she's known now, to effectively bring in kind of Scottish independence, which...
That's not how she's known down here, by the way. Major General is the honorific we don't use.
Well, she was spectacularly managed to find something in the original treaty between Scotland and England regarding kind of plagues and natural disasters, and she brought that kind of in, and with Brexit in, she brought us basically a hard border. So when the disasters kind of came, we were able to basically shut ourselves off. So life has, we've had our moments now and again, but most of us are horrific looking reprobates anyway up here in the north. So normally if a zombie or whatever does get in, we normally just assimilate them into the society, seeing as how welcoming we are. And because we've all been drinking...
Well, that's the point. I mean, the amount of people she's killed, Scarlet Hand Sturgeon, as just, she's made Scotland... apparently up there, people are enjoying ambrosia and heather. You can eat heather, right?
You have to boil it for a couple of days. I think the most amazing thing was the fact the infection didn't really manage to spread that far, because the first thing that Major General Sturgeon did was she broke out her own she broke out her own kind of batch of full sugar iron brew and insisted that we drank it solidly for at least 3 months. And that essentially rotted away most of the population's teeth, which meant that the entire bite mechanic, which was the major form of infection, didn't manage to spread, which is why I'm managing to enunciate, but I must say, these are totally false. So,
it's amazing. That's really interesting. It never occurred to me. Had that occurred to us earlier, we could have just knocked people's teeth in. But it makes sense. Your dental lack of hygiene saved your life.
Basically, our lack of flossing.
So what are you doing here then? What did you do to transgress to get thrown out and sent over the border?
Well, as with all things, when you've got a kind of a shortening of resources, there was the faction within the kind of the party, as we call them, that decided that we needed to check the backgrounds of people who were originally born in Scotland to see if there was a trace of any kind of horrific English elements in them. And unfortunately, it turns out that my mother is from Bristol, and her mother was actually from Gdansk and originally from Russia. So when we did the birthright check, I pretty much was standing there with my suitcase packed and ready to go. Luckily, I've, having grown up in some of the rougher parts of Scotland, I was, walking down through a zombie-infested nuclear winter landscape is a fairly easy thing to do.
So I suppose then, the bloke came round to, do the check, to swab your cheeks, and you were just like, open the door. All right, my lover. Oh yeah, that's love. Oh my God. Oh no. And then from then on, that was it.
It was kind of like the bit in The Great Escape where they're kind of in the train station, and at the very end the guy says, good luck, and he just went, and how are you this fine evening? And I went, I'm grand, I've never been better.
Gert Lush.
Oh yeah, and that was me, kicked out, sent down south to join the heathen.
The thing is, the upshot is you're in this here compound, which is, it's not a land of wine and roses, but it's pretty nice. There's some nice people here.
It's There's, obviously I like, there's like obviously Tragic Stephen, who, I've never seen a man cry so much in his life.
Indeed.
Many Fingers Thomas, he's quite good. Majula the Nose Singer, they're always really, really good fun.
I mean, sometimes you do not want to see it when he gets a cold, though. Oh, it's horrible.
I kind of have seen some of the kind of the more affected residents kind of hang around him with a grateful bucket, ready to collect his contribution to society. So there we go.
Well, food can sometimes be quite dry here. I mean, that certainly is true. And if you're talking about lube, don't get me started.
I believe he's responsible for helping a few couples round here with potential dryness.
Indeed. And there's nothing cuter than a four-nostrilled, three-legged baby. Anyway, so I don't know if you're familiar, but I requisitioned a Segway and I go around the compound and I ask people questions about board games, to try and lighten the mood, to make sure, that they don't, kill themselves, because quite honestly, there's lots of work to be done, and I mean, it's happening weekly, but since I've been doing my questions, there's been less suicide, which is nice.
That is potentially always a good thing to keep morale up. I mean, there is nothing worse than discovering that half your workmates have disappeared over the weekend, really, I guess, when it comes down to it,
And the problem is, as well, I mean, because now superstition is rife, a hangman's rope is no longer viable as rope. It has to be burnt, which is nice for fuel and everything, but, there's only a limited amount of rope, especially since hemp is still illegal, which is an odd thing.
I mean, I think you ran out of salt, am I right, about 6 months ago, because every time somebody dropped it, they kept chucking it over their shoulder, and then people refused to pick it up, and it just went into an actual... And I see all the cats, all the black cats especially, have gone, and for some reason, I don't know how you've done it, but there seems to be horseshoes everywhere, but no actual horses. But I don't know if you've eaten them or
haven't been
not.
for years. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a zombie, 4 for a goy. Anyway, so the question I went around asking people was, is board game social media good for the hobby? I asked them to do like a role play. Yeah. Imagine they were back in 2019 when the world was still going, and they could go on the Twitters.
Oh.
So, I mean, the reason I asked this question is because I knew we were going to bump into each other and we'd have a chat at some point. And, back in the normal times, you had a brief, all too shimmering moment of Twitter celebrity, which I noticed you shamelessly pinned to your Twitter profile. Quite embarrassing.
I kind of, yeah. Well, I mean, I think if you're going to shine twice as bright and you're going to end up kind of burning half as long, then you take any kind of bit of self-fulfilling, ego-boosting, kind of social media as wherever you kind of go.
And it was quite indicative of the end times that, a clarion call for mediocrity was hugely popular.
I just, I don't know if people realised it was just sarcasm on a Monday morning. And then there was, I struggle. I remember being kind of messaged at least once or twice a day to say, do you realise you're on LinkedIn? Do you realise you're on, you're on here on Reddit? Those, fantastic places which were just literally libraries and gatherings of complete and absolute shite. And I remember that, and I think people telling me they were inspired about it, when at the end of the day it became something that social media is a funny thing, because you kind of, I know of so many people that chase the dream to be known and well known and want to be recognised and have almost that adulation. But then when you get something like you do go viral, you go through that, and then it's kind of like, well, what next is happening? And the truth of the matter is, it's usually absolutely the square root of fuck all. Because
it was really interesting that, like, a couple of days after you released that tweet, I saw within the board game community, and I think it was because, you were in the board game community and other people were trying to hop on the wagon, some cloner-like tweets.
Yeah.
I remember seeing one particularly, which was basically, your first design will be terrible, your second design will be terrible, but you'll never get to your great game design without going through those terrible. So just get out there and design. And I was like, you just read bloody Gandalf's tweet, didn't you?
I know. I didn't know you knew what my middle name was. I think the interesting thing...
Well, I had to do the cavity search, if you remember, when you were admitted.
I didn't know why you had to use 5 fingers. Yeah, but I think the interesting fact of it is that you get kind of... it's not the small guys that go ahead and copy it. It's these big, huge companies that have got millions of followers on like Instagram that you see they've no shame. They just go ahead, they cut the top off, they cut the bottom off, they stick it on their page and they go, look what we did, or they change it. And I've contacted, you end up at the beginning, you contact these people to say, oh, you go and credit us, and they don't give a shit. They just go ahead and they're like, well, what are you going to do about it? If you try and call us out on social media, we'll just block you. Nobody's going to believe you over us because we've got several million followers. But on the other side of it, the upshot, though, was that I did, for the briefest spell before the apocalypse, I did an occasional different podcast called Make Something Awful, which was because I like dealing with people in the board game space, but also at the same time there's a whole load of other creative people out there who are doing wonderful, fantastic things, and I'm nosy. I like to speak to people. That's why when we've spoken in the past, it was about your acting, because to me that's a fascinating thing to discuss and to talk about. So I did the Make Something Awful kind of podcast for a bit until the apocalypse actually kind of took us away and Major General Sturgeon did her thing, and that was just Well, this
is great though, because I put this over the tannoy, and not many people know you here, and those who do have just been saying, when do we get to kill the Scottish person? When do we get to kill them? And I've been saying, you can't kill them. We're trying to build civilization here.
Did you tell them I'm actually part English anyway, and I'm also part Russian
I've been beating that drum. I've been telling them that you're actually from Bristol and that everything's lush. But yeah. I went on the Wayback Machine, so my old computer. I've just fired it up, and I've noticed that it's obviously Twitter stopped down in the apocalypse, but I got a copy of that tweet that you sent, and it stood. As the apocalypse approached, 452 comments, 39,000 retweets, and 110,000 likes. Now, what is the pleasure that you get from that? Because obviously there must be some sort of hindbrain kind of adrenaline rush when your phone just starts going beep with all the notifications. What is the pleasure that you get, and how long does that last?
It's at the beginning, I think. At the beginning, just because it's going so crazy. Because at the time, your phone's on vibrate and it's just vibrating away, again and again and again and again and again. And you're kind of, and then people comment, and I was lucky because pretty much 99% of the comments that I got were absolutely positive, and people going to the point of saying kind of I really needed to see this today, which I don't. It comes back to interaction, people liking it and retweeting it. It doesn't do anything. It kind of helps spread the word, but it's really weird because the 452 I guess interactions kind of meant more than the 110,000 likes, which is a strange way to I guess kind of put it. So to me it was kind of knowing that people were not just sharing it for the sake of sharing it, but they were kind of responding to it for the sake of kind of how it was affecting them, which sounds incredibly kind of big-headed, but I guess at the same time it was kind of that interaction that went, well actually maybe I do have something here. And that kind of led to a kind of a sense of, well, if I'm interacting with people and they say, well, today I am going to go ahead and do this thing for the first time. And surprisingly enough, one gentleman went away and he read a piece of work by H.P. Lovecraft and put it on YouTube and said, look, I've made my first thing. Is it awful? And it kind of was and wasn't. It was really, really well done. But the guy says, right, I'm going to go on and do other things. You have set me in motion, the fire that I want to do, kind of other things, which I thought was just, you know, if that's what I've managed, if that's kind of what I've managed to do from something that was crafted at 8:30 on a Monday morning, on the 1st of April as well, can I add? So it's actually April, you know, it wasn't even, I was just, you know, I had a day off. I had tons of stuff to do regarding the podcast and stuff. So I just went, you know what, I've got to do a video. I can't be bothered doing a video. I know it's going to be crap, but I'm just going to get on with it. And I thought, well, I'll just, you know, put something up there. You had no idea. Nobody, I think, crafts a viral tweet. I think there's a manufactured place where people who are already relatively quite famous have the ability to make things viral. But I think when it just happens kind of organically, yeah, it kind of makes you worried nowadays. Worried that somebody's then going to go back through my previous tweets and go, oh yeah, but he says he's a wizard. Kill him, kind of thing, you know.
So when you came into the compound, there was this zombie that was waving at you vigorously, sort of going, thank you, I'm the Lovecraft man. So was he the guy who recorded the Lovecraft stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing how these things... I mean, you should have gone and shaken his hand. I mean, of course you would have been shot had you have done so. But, you know, it's nice to meet your fans.
Or the hand would have fallen off in my hand, and then it would have had this awkward kind of, I'm holding your hand, I don't know what to do with it. Yeah, I mean, there's all these different types of things. It was still going on. It was strange. The strangest thing about it was I ended up having to post it on Instagram and post it on Reddit. No, I didn't post it on Reddit, but somebody else did, and put it on LinkedIn because people were doing it. So I had to say, oh, hang on, I've got to almost do my dog pissing on the lamppost kind of thing.
But why? I mean, usually when people ask for credit, it's not just about reflected glory or direct glory. It's also about the fact that, you know, you don't want anyone making cash off something you've created. But a tweet is so ephemeral and so sort of, I mean, you're not going to make any money off it. It's like YouTube back in, you know, 2001, where people were getting viral YouTube videos and not making a penny, you know. I mean, why did you feel like you had to piss on the lamppost? Were you not happy for it to just morph and mutate and become this thing that you'd let free into the world, but it then become its own thing?
I think I didn't mind the smaller guys. I minded the big guys who know how social media works. Who, you know, there was like on LinkedIn, there was like 100 guys who were web developers in India who had all copied and pasted it. You know, and that was fair enough, you know. But it was just the big guys that were kind of like, this is my idea, look at this wonderful message I am putting across to my 1 million followers. It's like, surely you can come up with something original. You're actually effectively copying something which is telling you to go ahead and create your own content. I mean, the irony of that whole thing just, you know, made me cry and laugh. And it is, I mean, at the beginning you're like, oh, hang on, you're claiming this, but this is mine, kind of thing. And I guess you get to the point where you're like, okay, I just let it go and just see what kind of happens. And nowadays people have changed it to say that, you know, your first whatever will be awful, but your first bit of code will be perfect and it'll be hello world. And I had a couple of people say, oh, this is now here. So it's kind of everywhere. It was kind of weird at the time.
I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of old-fashioned. While I agree with what you said, I mean, there's no question. You can't walk before you can run. Still, I was speaking to someone the other day and they were talking about how wonderful it is that you get to see people learn in public. And I kind of don't agree with that, you know. I think it's your first podcast will be awful. Don't release it to the public. I mean, unless you don't care. I mean, fine. But I'm very much of the opinion that I want to know how to use the software, and I want to get a decent mic, and I want to structure the episode, and I want to work as hard as possible to make it as good as possible before real people who aren't my friends and family get to hear it. Right?
Yeah.
It's just not my bag. Rank amateurishness is kind of not my bag. Right?
I think my point of view was from the point of view that I'd done so many episodes. I'd done so many episodes. I've done a lot of stuff in my life. And I was just trying to, I guess, reiterate that everybody, once they start something, will probably look back and think, well, actually, not external criticism, but internal criticism to themselves. They'll sit there and they'll chuckle away and go, that first thing I did, that was a bit awful, wasn't it? Kind of thing. Not as, and I think that there was some people that kind of, were like, oh, if you're just saying people are automatically going to be awful, that's preventing them from doing this. And I remember some guy going on a huge 5-tweet rant about it, and I just, and I just kind of like, there's the point, and you've kind of missed the point. The funniest kind of response at the time was from your good self, which was kind of like, basically, I knew you were taking the piss, and it was deliciously beautiful piss taking, which was just basically your first kind of orc will be awful, your first kind of, it was just conjuration. It was just completely wonderful and delicious at the time, and other people kind of, I think they took it too seriously, because I think they must have thought I sat down and I spent a couple of hours crafting it. There's a bloody spelling mistake in it. There's a grammatical error. There's no full stops in it. This isn't something that was crafted. It's just hilarious.
I think Twitter is not the place to craft, personally. And the thing is, I'm perfectly fine with, people thinking back and thinking, oh my God, that first story I wrote, Christ. But I just kind of hope that they keep it in their drawer for sentimental reasons rather than, inflict the crap on the world. You know what I mean? Anyway, I was speaking to Isaac Shalev, who's Ender 7. And he says here, as to the overall toxicity of tabletop social media, I'd say it's far less toxic than many other communities. There may not be a more civilized Reddit than are board games. And there are those who seek to make board games a battleground, but there's a mute button, and it's relatively easy to tune out whichever voices you find most irritating. And so, I got 2 questions. So the first one is, firstly, do you think that's true, that board game social media is by and large fairly civilized? And secondly, considering that Twitter and that social media ends up being a person's primary source of news gathering nowadays, is there a danger in willfully wielding the mute button to the point where you get stuck in this massive echo chamber and you have no idea of the humanity of people who disagree with you?
I think with regards to social media in general, there is too much of a tendency to join a bandwagon of judgment and then quickly go around kind of muting and blocking, only to find out in after the fact that maybe things were taken the wrong way, or things were taken or things have been proven to be untrue. One of the biggest, take the case of Johnny Depp, for instance, yeah? And I remember that story breaking about him and Amber Heard at the time. Of course, believe Johnny Depp's...
She's here. She's here somewhere.
Yeah, that's what
Johnny
she was.
keeps coming. Johnny keeps coming to the fence, going, red wine. And I just haven't had the heart to shoot him in the head, because I did enjoy Edward Scissorhands. You know what I mean?
Well, I just and all these other, wonderful, pieces of work. Benny and June was always a particular favourite of mine.
Yeah, not bad. Hated Alice in Wonderland. Terrible.
Yeah, I just, I don't... The Tourist, I think I saw, was one of the things I saw him in last. I don't know, the Pirates of the Caribbean kind of... I see where he was going with it, but it kind of... I don't know, it was a blockbuster film that I wasn't in a blockbuster mood at the time. But anyway, my point is that there was a huge wailing of gnashing of teeth when the story broke about Johnny Depp. And then everyone's like, well, that's it, everybody's cancelling Johnny Depp, he's out of everybody's life. And then, of course, 7 or 8 months later, when everybody's probably blocked, muted, whatever, people have had arguments about it and defences, and there's been aggro about it, then comes out, well, potentially the shoe was on the other foot and that he was the guy that was getting kind of attacked. And, social media has a way of... you can end up in a lovely little bubble of people that you completely agree with their viewpoints, and sometimes this is how kind of wrong viewpoints can start if you just surround yourself by people that, not wrong viewpoints, but certain viewpoints kind of start because you've got nobody else from outside. I mean, society itself relies on Brownian motion. It relies on people bumping into each other, sometimes gently, sometimes rather violently, and that's how kind of society learns from each other. And I think sometimes one of the things that social media allows people to do is it makes it very, very easy for you to meet other people with exactly the same interests of you. It also makes it incredibly easy to surround yourself with people of exactly the same interests of you and completely ignore everybody else who maybe has a different perspective on things. And that is kind of a dangerous thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's such disingenuousness here. There's a lot of people who claim, to use Twitter as a tool for activism and all of this sort of stuff. So, I mean, I guess my question is, what is your goal for activism, right? Because if you have this situation, firstly, if your goal for activism is the immediate reinforcement of your phone buzzing because someone has liked your statement, then your intentions aren't entirely pure. And the fact is, activism is about engaging those who you don't agree with and seeking to change their mind. If you're just going to bloody mute everyone who disagrees with you, you're not an activist. You're a self-serving scumbag who wants to get applauded by your own social group. This is not activism. This is the opposite of activism. And there is too much of this, especially in the social media world. You have this situation where people say, I'm for inclusivity. But only if you agree with what I agree with. If you happen to have this viewpoint, we can't park that viewpoint and sit around a table and play games with each other. This is absolutely not acceptable. You should be excluded from the group. I spoke to someone who told me, literally, these people should be excluded from our community. And you're not changing minds that way. That's not activism. All that is the cheap desire to get reinforcement from your social group. And this is the problem with social media in all spheres. And I see this an awful lot in board game social media.
I think the other thing with, especially Twitter, I don't think it's as much as Facebook, is Twitter seems to be the only platform that is flooded with people who simply do not exist. That are there to have, and you see them all the time, and it's, there's no point in kind of, it stops engagement because half the time you don't know if you can go into somebody's account and all you see is they've come out with the most ridiculous statement. You're like, well, let's have a debate, But you go to debate somebody and have a chat and you click on their profile and you notice that they've just done nothing but retweet kind of Donald Trump and Fox News and Nigel Farage and stuff like that. And you're kind of like, I don't know if you're a real person. I don't know if you're just there to amplify things, which then leads people into deciding whether or not they're going to bother discourse in the first place.
And, there's no question that certain demographics get overwhelming amounts of abuse on Twitter. But if you're an activist, if this is your deal, this is what you sign up for, I'm afraid. Otherwise, don't claim that. Because what an activist does, if their first engagement with you is you're a fucking cunt, you should die, then you need to try and bring that person back down from where they are. You need to find out why they feel that it's legitimate to engage you in that way. And yes, fine, I may be in a demographic that doesn't get a lot of shit on Twitter, but nevertheless, neither do I claim to be an advocate for inclusivity, and neither do I tout my heroics on Twitter and then mute anyone who disagrees with me. This is not acceptable in my eye. If you're going to be an activist, otherwise keep your mouth shut, right?
It's a danger of only including people that you would want to be included and not have somebody kind of coming along with different political views. But I guess that's social media. Social media for me isn't necessarily the place for political discourse because of the tone, unless you're able to take it to a full-on kind of almost face-to-face, seeing the person kind of discussion. I think it's difficult to just take a random person and have a I did have a discussion with somebody quite recently, which was regarding what was happening in Alabama, and we kind of, we kind of did have a discussion, and we had differing points of view, but at the end of it we just said, look, thank you for your time and thank you for your discussion. There wasn't an aim to change somebody's mind. There was an aim to understand, I guess, where they kind of were coming from in their
that's the first step. No, that's the first step, because I had this discussion with someone on Twitter about pro-choice, anti-choice, and they were clearly anti-choice, and this person was very polite and tried to sort of back me into a corner and essentially admit to murder, which is what they were doing. But they were doing it in a very polite way, and I thanked them very much for their slightly ham-fisted manipulation tactics, and then I explained what my position was, and they were very polite back to me, and they said, and at the end of the discussion, they said, thank you for the discussion. Now, would I sit down and play games with that person? Absolutely. Do I think that their viewpoint on this particular topic is fundamentally wrong and damaging and dangerous to society? Absolutely. But me calling them a cunt isn't going to change their mind. No? Absolutely not. And just because they disagree with me on this point, they're probably a wonderful parent, and they probably have a group of friends who love them and value them, and they pay their taxes, and they're good to their community, and any number of things. People are not evil simply because they have one facet that they adhere to, which has probably, by the way, been ingrained into them since they were children. And quite frankly, the pass that religion gets in the debate when political beliefs don't blows my mind. There are religious beliefs that are absolutely fundamentally harmful to society, and yet we're supposed to shut up and allow people to practice their barbaric beliefs completely independently if they take a political stance, which is probably a result of their upbringing too, just as much as their religious belief is. We're allowed to barrack them. Frankly, we calmly attack both with equal vigour.
It's interesting because my wife's from Northern Ireland, and not herself, but certainly I know people that she knows that are connected to the family and stuff like that they take a word of a politician as gospel, to use, not being a pun thing, but they have been brought up in a way that a person of authority, because their entire, the normal person of authority is telling something that they need to take on faith. That when a politician tells them something, a lot of them kind of take it, an older generation kind of take it on faith, because that's what they've been brought up to do. So, I know people in Northern Ireland who voted for Brexit because they were told they read, and a politician isn't going to lie. They're a person of authority, and they didn't question it, because you don't question authority. Questioning authority is not a good thing. So you take it, you believe it, you take it to heart. You don't question it. You don't try and seek external sources. You don't speak to everybody else. Everybody else is on the same hymn sheet. And it was only in the aftermath that they're then presented with other facts from other sides, and they say, but that's not what we voted for. That's not what we expected. This is not, but it was that kind of thing at the, at the beginning of them taking that as, this is what you should be doing. And they were like, yes, okay, I'm not going to question this at all. And, and that's why people are asking, well, why did so many people in Northern Ireland vote for Brexit? Because they were told of various things that were currently going on, and they took that as that was the reason,
And this is the point with Twitter, right, is that Twitter should be a free exchange of ideas, and the mute button is the antithesis for that. Blocking is the antithesis for that. What it encourages is ghettoization, and what it encourages is division. I think people, frankly, should broaden their minds, even if they think they're right. So, Mad Halfling said, I asked him, and interestingly enough, for Mad Halfling, he's actually quite sane, but he said, personally, social media has been fantastic for me. I've hurled abuse in a fun way at all sorts of podcasty folks, and I've ended up meeting quite a few of them regularly in real life. The Game Pit people, the Oiks from Polyhedron Collider, Paul Grogan, all of them dead. It's tragic. Mike from Who Dares Rolls, alive. Absolutely tragic.
Who knew it?
Then by proxy, I know, co-infestation. Ben, I think he's talking about me. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is, does social media facilitate you meeting the people who enjoy your work? And is that a good thing?
I think because of where I was meeting people when I first went to AirCon back in 2019 for the first time, I think it certainly helped to facilitate meeting a few people that I was going to be meeting for the first time. I think it's also a very nervous time as well, because, and I think I wrote. It was really weird because I wrote in my write up, because I did a write up for AirCon, and I said that what was interesting is that when I'm writing stuff on social media for like Facebook, or even writing back and forward in DMs, I'm a very conscious person of how I come across. I think I come across sometimes as a complete idiot, and I am the person who will look back and, I'm like the dog on the old Vic and Bob's Big Night Out or whatever that goes, oh no, I can't believe I said that, my wife's going to kill me, kind of thing, because I look back. So I am a person who, if I'm sending...
My wife's going to kill me.
Exactly, oh no, I'm tilting him about 3:30, for a couple of points, it'll be brilliant. Oh no, why am I saying that? But, yeah, so I'm a type of person that if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I hate kind of making, feeling like I fucked up, basically. There's nothing worse if somebody says to me, I didn't like that. You've kind of, that's upset me, or I didn't, that'll absolutely crush me. So, and I've always kind of generally monitored how I communicate. My concern with meeting people face to face, even on a podcast, I said this, if I mess up in a podcast, nobody really gets to hear that, because I've got the potential to just edit it out if I think I'm sounding like a fanny. If I think I sounded like an idiot, I can take that out. I usually, if I do edit the podcast, I'm editing me as opposed to editing the other people. Usually because I've talked too much as normal. And the social media, when I was like meeting people, it kind of put nerves, because this is, okay, there's not a persona, but even the person on the podcast is maybe slightly different from the people that I'll meet in person. So it kind of gave me a little bit of anxiousness. So I hope, obviously it was nonsense, and the fact was I probably am just exactly the same as I come across on Twitter and in person. I mean, just kind of overthinking is normal, but it did allow me to kind of tag and meet up with people, and people I've had conversations with, and good conversations through DM, and kind of actually meeting people face to face, and already not having that first kind of awkward step, kind of how getting to know you type thing. I was kind of like straight into kind of like, well, we've already been speaking for what appears to be in some cases kind of months now, so we can just kind of I guess kind of just get on with it, really, and start from there.
And this for me is the single greatest benefit. Being into games, being into the hobby, you get over that initial awkwardness, and you just know people because of short interactions on Twitter or Facebook, and it's wonderful. And every time I go to a con, there's people I only have known digitally up until that point, and you're kind of able just to get along with them. And I think social media hit its sort of zenith during the Arab Spring, and people thought, wow, this is a viable tool for activism. You can change the world with Twitter. And then it became this, cesspool in which, and now that's the common meme. Social media is a cesspool. Social media ruins your life. But of course, that notion is as absurd as saying it's the greatest good for humanity. Of course, the truth, as always, quite tritely lies somewhere in between. And social media has been hugely beneficial to me in my pursuit of meeting new people, becoming ingrained within a community that I think can be wonderful at times, and is mostly wonderful. And I think I agree with Isaac in the sense that board games are pretty much universally polite. There are people who, I would say, verge on the hysterical at times, but even those people, you get the sense that they're only doing it because they're frustrated. And,
I don't think you could get direct toxicity in playing a board game with somebody. I don't think it's like video games. There are people who just are actual wankers when you play them online multiplayer games. Their actions or what they say to other people or how they generally, it's like they left their manners book in their other jacket and they're just being assholes. I can't imagine playing somebody face to face at a board game, and there is that kind of, we're sitting around the table here, which is kind of strange, but there is a kind of almost like an unwritten kind of manners, which everybody's sitting around, we're all going to be kind of polite, we're all going to have this polite kind of conversation, and basically it would be the case of, and this is where I guess social media is a bad thing, is I know of people who have been nasty to other people, and it's like, you would not, if you met that person face to face, would they be saying that to you?
Of course they wouldn't.
They wouldn't say that. And I reckon that one of the great things about board games is that because you have that face-to-face interaction, because there's the potential that you might be sitting across from somebody and there's that politeness, you wouldn't put up with that shit if somebody started to be narky and nasty and start kind of like mucking around with the game or just making comments. I think people would kind of say, they'd be willing to kind of say something, or they might be willing just to turn around and go, "Are you okay, mate? Because this isn't like you," or it's something up kind of thing. This is the other thing as well as social media. If somebody's acting like an actual dickhead online, you're less likely to turn around and go, "Look, is there something wrong here? Is there something you need to have a conversation about? Are you struggling at the moment, which is why you're kind of lashing out at me?"
Then how many threads do you see? A thread will pop up occasionally with someone saying, someone attacked me on Twitter, and I asked them what was wrong, and this is the result. And they show this thread, and it kind of inevitably ends up with the person on the other side going, "Look, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that, But there's no understanding because Twitter is immediate and it's angry. And, the problem is with society, it's a combination of capitalism seeking to atomize us. Because in the eyes of capitalism, what we are not citizens but consumers. So they want us to consume. What makes us consume? Unhappiness. What makes us unhappy? The lack of society with people. So what what capitalism wants us to do is atomize us, put us alone in front of screens, not engaging with other people. Therefore, we fill that hole in our soul with buying. Couple that with how easy it is to get a sort of diluted, sort of weak Ribena version of human interaction by going on Twitter or going on Facebook. And you have this situation where people just aren't engaging, and we've lost the village green. We've lost the local pub. We've lost the town hall meeting. We don't come together as communities and eat together and talk to each other anymore. And this is, I think, fundamentally dangerous, and we need to facilitate this more in society. And one thing board games do is sit people in genuine geographical proximity with other people. So when someone is being rude, you can see their facial expressions, you can see they're in pain. Or you can see they're just an asshole and then you no longer speak to them again. But at the same time, things like board games, things like sporting events, they need to be an integral part of human society. Because if we're going the way it seems, we're all going to end up sitting alone in pods, being miserable.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting that somebody said that quite recently that Twitter's got the technology to remove all these bots and all these fake accounts. They have the ability, and they choose not to because it affects, they have to report the number of active users to their investors, and that by allowing the bots to kind of be there and to thrive, it increases interactivity because, somebody that's barbling kind of nonsense and you're trying to agree with them, and then they just, they don't respond, or they come back with more nonsense or start to be insulting. You're interacting with them, and Twitter allows to use it as a metric to say that we've had 3.2 billion interactions in the last 6 months, and therefore it allows people to say you should come on and you should pay to advertise to these people. So it's kind of like an interest. I'd be interested to see if Twitter did almost like a kind of a clear off and got rid, because they're pretty easy to spot. It's not ridiculously difficult to do. There was a thing, was it Nigel Farage went on TV and said, we've got 100,000 Twitter followers within the first 24 hours of launching the party, to which there was literally hundreds of people pointing him in the direction of reports to say, but it shows that 25% of those followers that you have are just false. They don't exist. They're not real people, but they would be programmed to then respond to people kind of contacting Farage and going, you've got no policies, you're an asshole. And then somebody, a bot would respond, Brexit means Brexit or whatever. So it's almost a case of, Twitter is a good thing, but Twitter as it stands just now, to me, isn't what Twitter was at the very, very beginning. Because I remember Twitter at the beginning, and it was interaction, and you were picking up follows from random people because you just wrote something funny and amusing and stuff like that, and it wasn't full of everything that it was just now. And there was a general kind of more of a chit chat back and forward, and people were still quite polite. People were still aware, I don't really know this person. I don't know who this person could be. So I'm gingerly going to be, are you okay? Are you fine? How are you today? And, rather than just going, you're a fucking bastard, aren't you? Kind of thing, which you kind of get kind of nowadays, which is, to me, is very, very sad. It could have been a potential to bring people together. At the moment, to me, social media and board games is a kind of a good thing. Twitter in general just seems to be a horrific monster of a polarising polar bear of polarity. It's a ridiculous phrase.
Well, anyway, but thankfully, due to the end of our society, it's no longer a question.
Yeah.
So we can talk about whether standing around the slurry pit is a toxic thing to do. Anyway, I'm going to go off now because Janine is still away on zombie burning duty for the next week or so. So I'm going to go and I've started painting. And it's just pictures that I've dredged up from my soul. So basically,
When
It's
you
just
say dredged up from your soul, you're not doing dirty painting again, are you, Ben?
Well, that's how I find the paint, from the soles of my shoes.
Oh, as long as it's not 2 feet further up, then we're fine.
Now, if you want to join the guild, first, make sure you ain't dunked your winky or your tuppence in a toxic puddle. Then, go to the Board Game Geek Guild number 3209. Now, this society ain't gonna build itself up from the ground up itself, so get out there, shake some hands, and make some babies.